stopped listening to him a long time ago.
I don't blame you.
Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, I thought was entertaining. I don't consider him to be an especially brilliant foreign policy analyst, but he said, let's give peace a chance. What I think people have figured out is, look, this is a waste of time. We were in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong force structure, fighting the wrong war with the wrong people. Didn't make any difference what we did. We were not going to be successful. I think we were harming ourselves. I think our financial system is already very fragile. There are two views of this. I was listening to somebody who said, well, there's this facade, the economic facade, based on the financialization of our economy. And then you look at the real economy. In other words, what do we produce? Who works? Who doesn't? And so forth. The real economy is on life support. The financialized economy is the casino called the stock market. That looks great. I think President Trump got a glimpse of that. I think people said, don't you realize what's happened to our friends? Look at the impact of this on Japan, on Malaysia, on Indonesia, on Vietnam. Look at all of these people that are suffering. If we don't stop this is going to get a lot worse. I don't know if it was you or someone else who asked me a few weeks ago, what happens if we restart this war? I said, well, then it'll be 5 to 10 years before we recover from it in any way, shape, or form. But I said, if we can stop at this point, in other words, don't restart it, then we're looking at 2 or 3 years. But of course, it'll never go back to the way it was. And see, the big problem the neocons have, who dream of this world that will only be safe when U.S. forces occupy all of it, okay? That's their dream, which is really harnessed to make the world safe for Israel. Okay, got to understand that. That's the underlying theme. The truth is, the world doesn't need us. We don't need to be in all those places. It's a waste of money. We can do much better without it. And we can go back to doing business. That's what I think Donald Trump understands. But I think he was shown the bill in human terms as well as financial terms, and he recognized this bill is too high. We can't pay it. I'm not saying the man doesn't have a heart, and there is not even a shred of human compassion in him. I think there is. But I think he's also very much a realist. You can't be in business as long as he was and not have some appreciation for knowing when to cut your losses and go.
He sent the bill he got that he thought was too high. I think he sent it to the Gulf right now. They're coughing up most of the bill, unfortunately for them.
Well, the problem there is, and I hope that he gets the support he wants financially, but we're not going back. It's just not going to go back to the way it was, for the very simple reason that this change in technology and warfare makes it impossible for us to protect them. That's the real lesson, whether you're in China, Taiwan, Korea, it doesn't matter where you are. We can't protect other people from these kinds of threats.
We saw that with the US bases in the region. That was a perfect example. Warfare has changed and strategy needs to adapt.
Exactly. And by the way, assuming that if the world doesn't have Americans running all over it is going to be a bad place, I think is a big mistake. I have a lot of friends that say, Doug, don't you understand what you're talking about? This is the end. I said, well, what happened for the 5,000 years before we showed up? We have to get back to understanding we're part of the world. We don't exist apart from the rest of it, and the rest of it doesn't exist apart from us, but whatever.
I have an interesting theory that I've been thinking about for the last week or so, is if Israel tries to sabotage the deal by continuing to strike Lebanon, whether now or in a few weeks or even in a few months, Iran retaliates as they have before, and Trump decides to do what he did 2 weeks ago and say, hey, I have nothing to do with it, Israel, I'm not going to get involved, not even defensively, not even intercept Iranian missiles. If that happens, first, is it a possibility? Second, do you think Israel would get into a war with Iran without American support?
I think what you describe is almost already happening. I mean, the Israelis are shelling from artillery positions, parts of southern Lebanon. I think it's almost a certainty that they will launch attacks against whatever they describe as being Hezbollah positions. Hezbollah for them represents what they think is an existential threat. And the only way they know how to deal with that is with force. They need us to assist them with that operation. They need our munitions. They need our missiles. They need all sorts of things, our intelligence, everything that you can think of. Will Donald Trump say what you just did? I think he's going to say, look, I've told you to stop. You need to stop. If you stop, we can make the world a better place. If you won't stop, I can't support you. Then Netanyahu gets on the phone and electrifies the circuits all over Washington, D.C., all the think tanks and all the agents and all the House members and senators who are on the payroll and says, damn it, go into that man and tell him that if he doesn't support us, you're going to impeach him. Tell him if he doesn't support us, he's not going to last in office. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you're going to see happen. And we're going to find out the answer to your question. I mean, I'll be frank with you. At this point, I am genuinely concerned about the president's safety more than I ever have been before.
I've been hearing this a lot. We were talking about Tucker. Tucker told me that. Marjorie Taylor Greene said that to me yesterday. Joe Kent said that to me. Anna Kasparian said that to me today. And that's just in the last week. And I've been thinking about it as well. And I started doing a deep dive, talking to people about the Butler assassination attempt. It is wild how many bizarre things, the unanswered questions still exist there. But yeah, Joe Kent says it openly. He believes the president is under duress, and he said that he's been saying that for months. But I agree with you that, wow, it's just a difficult thing to imagine, isn't it?
Now, unfortunately, it is, and I lived through President Kennedy's assassination, so I know exactly what it's like. I think, I think there are those around the president who are sensitive to this, no doubt, and they will do everything in their power to protect him. I'm sure of that. But if I were he, I would check everything. I would think seriously about appointing new people. He's got to step back and look back on the kind of support and advice he's received from the people around him. If he received the kind of advice which I think he's generally gotten is, yeah, boss, go do it. Yeah, boss, we're with you, this kind of nonsense. Those people are useless. Now, would he listen to somebody who told him something he didn't want to hear? I don't know. I mean, that's hard to know. People in power usually don't like people to contradict them. That's because they think they are in power because they knew everything. But we know from history, nobody knows everything. And you have to listen to people. Would he listen to others? We'll see. But I think he needs to think about new appointments. It's very important. The other thing is people are calling for his resignation in many cases. And I don't think he should resign until he has brought this to an end. He has to close out this chapter of American history. That's something he must do. For him to resign at this point is ridiculous. He's been at the beginning of this. He should be there at the end of it. And he should be the one to steer us out of this mess once and for all. Now, after that, if people are calling for his resignation, that's legitimate. That's obviously a decision he has to make. But right now, I don't support that. Right now, my greatest fear is not the resignation at this point. It's the assassination. I have no special intelligence, no special information of any kind to support that concern. It's just the way I feel about it.
How by the way, I didn't know you were 16 years old when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Do you remember that time?
No, I wasn't 16 years old. That's 1963. I was 10.
It was a quick chat GPT check during the interview. You were 10.
Artificial intelligence. You can't depend on it. Get it. Stop.
I tried to seem smart and pretend that I'm good with math. But I want to find out more why you're so concerned. I don't know how to ask it, but how would it work behind the scenes? I understand how the pressure campaign would work. All the pundits that support Israel would start criticizing Trump. You've got members of Congress starts to threaten to impeach him, speak negatively about him. The media starts to criticize him. Those I understand. How do you think it could escalate to something more sinister? How would that work? And I'm asking you to speculate here.
Well, you could start various criminal investigations into all sorts of activities that involve members of his family. Those could be launched quickly. Congress can do that. I'm not saying he's guilty of anything. I'm simply saying there are a lot of things that have been going on, and his personal wealth has grown astronomically since he became president, whereas during the first term, as I recollect, he lost money. During this term, he's increased his wealth dramatically, and of course, some of that wealth is really belongs to his children, who have been involved in all sorts of interesting deals. He's got people around him who are habitual deal makers when it comes to self-enrichment. These things are problematic, and they can be exploited in unsavory ways. And then finally, you have the Epstein files. And remember, he told someone, I can't remember who said it could have been Pam Bondi. She wasn't very careful about opening her mouth on more than one occasion. And I think she said that he had told her, a lot of these people in this are my friends involved in this Epstein file. And that was the excuse that was given for why he wasn't anxious to release all of it, unredacted. That could once again move back into center stage. So there are a lot of bad things that can be done in that sense. And those things then lead to people that make stupid decisions, that decide that, it's time for him to be removed. And sometimes that's calculated and orchestrated. And sometimes it's the wandering buffoon you never expected that shows up. That happened to FDR. He was in Chicago. A man came out of nowhere, tried to shoot him, blamed the depression on him, and instead shot the mayor of Chicago, Mayor Cermak. I mean, you just don't know. There are all sorts of strange things that can happen. And people are always in the hunt for someone to blame for whatever it is that they don't have or haven't achieved.
One thing that was fascinating that Joe Kent was telling me in our latest conversation is about how the system works, or how the beast works. And actually, Anna Kasparian was telling me about it today, and she reminded me of that conversation.
Anna Kasparian? You talked to Anna Kasparian?
Well, yeah, you know her well.
Oh,
no,
I get a big charge out of Anna. I think she's very lovely.
She's a bubble of energy. Now, I've chatted to her a few times, but we were talking today, and we were talking about this topic. It's something that's really been eating up my mind for a while. And so what she was explaining is how she was a journalist was explaining her. It's actually pretty fascinating, Colonel. She was saying in CENTCOM, she said, Murray, the head of CENTCOM, the commander of CENTCOM, doesn't have as much agency as you'd expect because of how big it is, and you've got all these different departments, etc., and they might act without the authorization of their commander. And and Joe Kent told me the same thing in other departments, and he's like, Murray, you'd be surprised on how the elected officials, the leaders of these various organizations, they don't have as much power or influence or knowledge or decision making as you'd expect. And that also applies, obviously, to the president. It doesn't have as much agency as you'd expect. You know where I'm coming from. It's like the system, you've got all these, I don't know, I'm not good at describing it, but you've just got all these different individuals within that system that don't always report to who's meant to be boss. And now how that fits into what I'm saying here is just the nature of the beast. That this war, and I know it's been happening for a few years, but this will kind of further exposed how little agency the president has, and how many people have too much influence within this American system. One that you're very critical of is the Israeli lobby and Israeli influence and Netanyahu's influence. But it's something that I'm, finding out more and more about in the last couple of years, and it is worrying. It's very, very concerning to see this.
Well, you also have the pharmaceutical industries.
Military-industrial complex.
The agricultural lobby is enormous, and all of these things operate as brakes on policy making. They can let something go through, or they can stop it dead in its tracks. But there's something even more important. You've got the Senate that has to confirm people. How many lobbyists does it take to go to a senator and say, we don't like that man? And you say, well, why? What's wrong with him? Well, we don't like him. He doesn't support us. So if you want to continue to have support from us, you better not vote for him. Or we don't like that lady. We don't like that woman. So the probability of getting very many really high caliber people of character and intelligence into key positions is low. Now, can that change? Of course it can change. When does it change? It changes in times of national emergency. People that you never heard of rise up in wartime. Everybody says, well, where was that general for 25 years? Why had nobody ever heard of him? Because nobody liked him. Nobody wanted him. He was a retired colonel. They were starting to boot him out the door, and the 30 years were coming up, and all of a sudden the war broke out, and they decided they needed him. You have the same thing in the banking industry. You go into every industry, you have this preference for someone they call a safe pair of hands. Well, we like him. He's not going to change anything. He keeps the money flowing. Is he going to support our program? Do you understand what I'm saying? That's why we elect people and then we expect miracles. And every president has about a year, maybe if he's lucky, 18 months. And in that time space, if he's smart, he can accomplish maybe 3 things on a list of 10. And then he loses steam because he's got to start running for re-election. And if they don't think he's going to get reelected, well, they don't care about him anymore. Now, this is not unique to republics. I know we talk about this, about republics. This is a weakness of democracy, but
yeah,
if you study authoritarian states, you see this sort of thing all the time. When you go to a totalitarian state like Russia or China, it's different. When you have someone like Stalin who presides over you, and before World War II is probably responsible for the deaths of maybe 25 or 30 million people on his own, and he has the power of life and death over anyone, he has a lot of power. He can get a lot done. If he decides, I want this tank, I want this aircraft, I want this bridge, I want this dam, I want this highway, it happens. But otherwise, no matter who you are, you have real constraints, and that's by design. We like that. We didn't like the authoritarian rule of George III, although in retrospect, I would argue it was pretty modest. But nevertheless, the people at the time were fed up with it, and a lot of people didn't like being taxed. If they looked at the taxes today, the people that ran the revolution then would probably look at us and say, you're crazy. Whatever. But I just think this is the nature of most political systems. The people that do well in them are people who can wheel and deal, who can compromise. And that's very distasteful to someone with principles, but it's unavoidable if you want to get something done.
And on the example that Anna gave me, she was referencing a journalist about even within CENTCOM, people like Brad Cooper don't have as much agency as you'd expect. Is it really that bloated, or that's an over-exaggeration?
Well, first of all, you're getting into something that I've written books about, and that is the problem with the service bureaucracy and service chiefs. If you are in a regional unified command, as Bradley Cooper is, who are you dependent upon for your forces? You're dependent upon the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, and the Marine Corps. They give you what they want to send you. You don't necessarily get everything you ask for. There are always limited quantities, and they decide how much you will or won't get. And if you can't get what you want, you go over them. And that means you go to the president and you say, Mr. President, you're the commander in chief. I need this. This is vital. Well, the president can make that happen. And then you alienate the service chiefs who will hate you forever and will work hard to harm you in any way they can. I mean, this is the nature of the beast. And remember, all of the people that hold all of those positions, they were confirmed by the Senate. And the Senate doesn't like anybody who's prepared to do anything. They want people who are going to sit there and say, yes, sir, I agree with you. I'm going to go along.
Colonel, pleasure to speak to you again. Which book do you recommend that talks about these things in the most in depth?
I think the last one I put out is really worth reading. Margin of Victory 5 battles that changed the face of war, modern warfare. Because certainly in the concluding chapter and in the beginning, I go over these problems that are very significant and try to make the point that sometimes we just have unrealistic expectations of what anybody can do in government on the average day. And we tend to focus on, well, look what Marshall did. But Marshall came to power at the outset of a war, and he received an executive order from the President of the United States that gave him virtual authority over the entire War Department. So he could do pretty much what he wanted. Now, he didn't do everything he wanted. He was a smart man, and he kept people informed, and he talked to people. He didn't blindside them. You know, you have to be smart about how you do these things. The more power you have, the less often you want to have to use it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And he was very smart about that. But no, I think margin of victory would interest people, and it goes through a series of battles in different parts of the world at different times in the 20th century. And lots of examples in there of where people tried to do what made sense, but they just couldn't. And they were prisoners of other people's decisions. There's no question about it.